Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing the 30th film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Now, just a heads up before we get into the meat and potatoes of the video, there might be points in recording where I end up pausing the vlog for one reason or another. Mostly because, one, I got a puppy who's rambunctious and may end up barking or doing something that requires my attention. And on top of that, I'm also dealing with a coughing problem, so I may end up pausing to take a cough drop or two or to get a drink, so just wanted to give you a heads up so you're not asking questions later. But anyway, that's not why you're here. That's not why you're here. We're here to talk about Black Panther. And well, before we get to talking about this film, let's talk about the first Black Panther movie. Overall, I thought the first Black Panther movie was a pretty good movie that I think it did well in establishing the world of Black Panther. I thought it had good characters, good action, amazing effects with the design of Wakanda and the technology they had. I thought it had a decent villain. It was ultimately, overall, I think a good movie that definitely laid groundwork for future projects in the MCU, while also being a good film in its own right. So I was, so like many other people, I was curious what they were going to do for future MCU projects and how they would integrate what was set up in this movie going forward. Sadly, though, tragedy struck. In between movies, the lead actor for Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, sadly died from leukemia. It was a tragic loss, and it left people wondering what was going to happen in the Black Panther movies following his death. Were they going, because like I said, he was the main actor. He played T'Challa, who was the titular Black Panther. What were they going to do with him? What were they going to do with these films going forward? Were they just going to replace the actor like they did with many others and just pretend nothing changed? Or was T'Challa going to be retired and they would have to find someone else to fill the role? I was ultimately one of the people that felt that T'Challa should be killed off with Chadwick Boseman because while I felt that while T'Challa hadn't appeared in a lot of stuff after his introduction, I felt he appeared in enough MCU projects that, well, I felt that the role had essentially become his own, and that, well, I kind of didn't want to see someone else take it from him, especially since his leaving of the MCU was because of, well, death. It kind of just felt disrespectful to just pretend that it felt just kind of disrespectful to just recast the role. And ultimately, many other people agree with me because Marvel Studios decided to not recast T'Challa and ultimately kill the character off in the canon. But that also left people wondering what they were going to do for future films because they weren't just going to end Black Panther right then and there. They were still planning to go forward with a sequel. It's just that it made you wonder what they were going to do with the sequel with the main character gone. Obviously, someone else is going to take up the mantle of Black Panther, but how are they going to get it? What circumstances would lead them to want it, etc. It just kind of left people with questions that ultimately which made them more curious to see what they would do with the next movie. And, well, when production for the second film began, it looked like it was more of an uphill battle, as many of the casting crew admitted that they were kind of dealing with that they were still kind of registering the loss of Chadwick Boseman, which they used as motivation to continue the film, but did make things a little harder. And on top of that, one of the main actors didn't get the COVID vaccine, so they had to keep delaying filming due to health concerns. So it definitely looked like it was kind of a rocky uphill battle for actually getting this movie out there. But out there it ultimately what did, as they did manage to finish filming and a trailer was released. And many people were ultimately excited for the film as they thought the trailer looked interesting. And as such, 2 weeks prior to me doing this, they did ultimately release the movie and many people wound up loving it. I myself, of course, went to go see it opening weekend, and now I'm back to record it for this vlog. So did I think it was really good? Or has my opinion changed between when I first saw it and now? But well, we'll just find out. And just a heads up, one, I did take notes for it, so I will be occasionally consulting these for anything that I need help remembering. And two, spoilers are abound. At the time, like I said, at the time that I'm recording this video, the film has only been out in theaters for 2 weeks. So if you have not seen Black Panther Wakanda Forever and you want to go in unspoiled, turn away now, because I am going to spoil the whole film rotten. There's not going to be one plot point that I don't go over or talk about, so if you don't want to go in spoiled, turn away now, because I'm not holding anything back. Are we good? Okay. Well, so before we get into that, let's get into my long-ass plot summary, and, well, to put it simply, the film begins with T'Challa's death. Yeah, they don't... the next part I'm going to talk about is something they don't discuss until later in the movie, but apparently in between films, T'Challa got sick. Now, nobody knew he was sick at first. Apparently, he did his best to cover it up and suffer it in silence, but eventually the sickness got too great, and he did wind up turning to his sister Shuri for help. But sadly, she wasn't able to help him, as while she did her best to try and find a way to heal him or make things better, or to ultimately fix him, all her experiments ended in failure, especially when she was trying to replicate the heart-shaped herb, which sadly got burned up at the end of the first film. So, yeah, things were kind of looking grim, and as such, Shuri wound becoming desperate to the point where, hold on a sec, sorry about that, that was a coughing fit. Anyway, like I said, Shuri did eventually get desperate to the point where even the slightest bit of progress that she wanted to use to help T'Challa, but sadly, all of her efforts were for naught, as by the time she finally did make an artificial heart-shaped herb that she thought would be able to help him, her mother came by with the news that T'Challa had sadly passed on. And as such, the next scene is literally his funeral, as they honor the dead, put him in a coffin, carry him through Wakanda, and he's ultimately taken away. And I'll admit, I think the funeral scene is a very strong scene because while they are playing some what's supposed to be upbeat music throughout all of Wakanda, the expression and the physical expressions and the physical language and the expressions of all the actors do well in conveying the sorrow they're feeling as they carry the body of such an important person in their lives through the city, combined with just the slow mo shots as the camera focuses in on them, the way they all kind of react to everything. There's even one scene in particular where Shuri ends up just collapsing onto T'Challa's coffin and just starts crying, and I think it's a very powerful scene that really does convey the emotions well for what they are trying to do. And so, what as such, once the funeral is over, the film once again do the Marvel Studios logo, which, like with Captain Marvel when they honored Stan Lee, they filled with shots of T'Challa throughout the MCU, which I think is nice, especially since the whole intro is just silent. But after that, the film cuts ahead to 1 year, and we see how things have developed since T'Challa's death, as his mother, Queen Ramonda, has now once again been put in charge of Wakanda, and in her grief, she's kind of made it a bit more closed off than ever. They're still part of the world and still interacting with all the world leaders, but under her guidance, it's become a bit more isolated than it was before, as she refuses to cooperate with anyone regarding the acquisition of vibranium, which, again, yeah, Wakandans don't want anyone else getting vibranium because they're afraid of what they would do with it, but other countries are desperate to the point where they've actually started sending mercenaries to Wakandan embassies that have been set up to hopefully get whatever reserves of vibranium they have. So yeah, but at the same time, Wakanda is they're still prepared and ready to fight back against everybody. Excuse me a second. Sorry about that, dog. Anyway, like I said, they're still prepared, as the Dora Milaje are able to fend off anyone that starts sniffing at their door to get vibranium, and on top of that, they are aware that other countries are searching for vibranium anywhere else in the world. So yeah, they don't. But considering the biggest reserve is under Wakanda, they really don't think they have anything to worry about. On top of that, we also see how the characters have been have been moving forward since T'Challa's death, and like I said, his mother is now the Queen of Wakanda, and in her grief, she's kind of become a bit more closed off to the rest of the world. And as for Shuri, is kind of throwing herself into her work. She just essentially wants to keep Wakanda moving forward, continue developing it, creating new technologies, new weapons, new armor that she thinks that can better help defend Wakanda. But sadly, even with T'Challa's death, she has refused to continue work on the heart-shaped herb, especially because, well, she thinks the Black Panther should die with T'Challa. That at this point he's dead. That pretty much his death means that there should be nothing. That the Black Panther is just done. And while even her mother has urged her to keep going, sadly she's just not budging. So it's clear that she's still kind of dealing with his death pretty hard. And on top of that, Hold on a sec. Again, puppy stuff. But like I said, on top of that, basically Shuri's just closing herself off more, and the more people try to get in, the more she just kind of shuts them out. And like I said, so yeah, things are not really going well. Or things are still pretty heavy around Wakanda. And while Shuri's mother does her best to try and help her, especially by bringing her to the edge of Wakanda near the ocean, where she wants to hold a ceremony where they burn their funeral garb as a sign of moving on, Shuri does not want to take part, as pretty much as in her own words, if she thinks about T'Challa for too long, it's not the robes that she wants to burn, but the whole world. So yeah, she's not taking his death well. However, it's during this ceremony when things kind of start to when the inciting incident for our movie begins. Well, sort of. There's actually another incident later, which I'll talk about in a minute. As we end up meeting our movie's villain, Namor, the Submariner, who arrives on their shores and immediately starts praising Wakanda, with Shuri and Ramonda pretty much getting ready for battle, and wanting to know who the hell he is and what the hell he's doing here. As such, Namor introduces himself and claims that he is here to make a proposition to the pair. As it turns out, well, Wakanda is not the only nation on the world that has access to vibranium. It turns out that Namor is the ruler of an underwater nation known as Talokan, and Talokan has had access to vibranium for generations, to the point where they've actually been able to fasten it. They've been able to use it to make their own weapons and gear, which Shuri even points out, as the jewelry that Namor is wearing is just adorned with vibranium. So it's clear that he does have access to it, and sadly and unfortunately, people have been sniffing around his business. As, like I mentioned, since Wakanda is not willing to trade vibranium, the other nations of the world have been trying to look for it anywhere they can, and their searches have taken them into the ocean. They even managed to develop a machine that's supposed to be able to detect vibranium, and it did come across a stash that, well, Talokan claimed have pretty much put a claim on. And as such, when a drilling operation in the middle of the ocean went to go reclaim it, well, Namor and the people of his kingdom wound up overtaking the entirety of the operation and killed everyone on there. And as a result, well, they wound up not only taking over the whole base, but they also wound up taking the machine. And, well, that's where Wakanda comes in, as Namor pretty much blames Wakanda for this, as if it wasn't for T'Challa opening up Wakanda to the rest of the world wouldn't be looking for vibranium and wouldn't be knocking on Talokan's door. As such, Namor wants Wakanda to fix this, even providing them with the machine that detects vibranium. The reason being, he wants them to find the scientists who created the machine and bring them to Namor, obviously with the intent of killing the scientists so that they can't make another one, as that was the only one they had. As such, he ends up giving them like a conch shell or whatever, saying when you find her, just blow into this and put it in the water and we'll come. And he ends up pretty much leaving, giving them a warning that if they tell anyone about Talokan, then it could be bad for them. As such, Shuri and Ramonda end up calling a meeting of the various elders of Wakanda, and it's pretty much just split down the middle whether they should listen to Namor or pretty much give him the up yours treatment. But ultimately, they do realize they should at least find the scientists who made the vibranium detection machine, because even if Wakanda is not willing to go out and search for her, the fact that she made this machine at all and that Namor and his people want her means that she has a target on her back. And yeah, I'm saying Shield gets that's kind of a spoiler, but whatever. Yeah, it means that the scientist has a target on her back, and they need to find her before Namor and his forces do. As such, Okoye, who ends up saying that she'll try and see. Yeah, Okoye volunteers to go find this person, though she also wants Shuri to accompany her. Something that Queen Ramonda isn't exactly okay with, but ultimately does concede to, especially since Shuri does kind of need some time out of the lab. As such, they decide that if they want to find the scientist, they've got to whatever lead they can use, and so they end up finding Agent Ross from the first movie and begin questioning him about the operation to find vibranium. And while he does try to be a bit tight-lipped about it, he does ultimately tell them who the scientist is that created the machine. And it's not some bigwig professor or some older gentleman who's had years of experience. It was a 19-year-old in college. Specifically a girl by the name of Riri Williams, who is a bit of a techie, as she is very intelligent and very much likes to build and create things, something she's been doing ever since she was a toddler. And as such, once Okoye and Shuri track her down, they are, of course, in disbelief, but at the same time, if Riri is the person that Namor wants, her life is in danger, so they need to get to her. As such, Shuri volunteers to go in first, and while she is able to approach Riri and talk to her, it's clear Riri is kind of dubious about the whole thing. She doesn't fully believe her, and even at one point when Shuri says, "Look, you gotta come with me, that your life is in danger," well, she does try to make a getaway before Okoye comes in and pretty much decides to force the matter. As such, in her resistance, she does end up throwing some appliances at them, which causes Shuri and Okoye to say, "Okay, fine, if you don't want to come with us, that's good. You can just deal with the angry merman and the army that he has all by yourself, so bye-bye." And that ultimately gets Riri to decide that she should at least maybe consider going with them. But before they do that, she stops by her garage, which is pretty much her tech workshop, in order to gather the specs of the machine on her laptop, which ultimately, which even Okoye says, "Well, why are you leaving this out in the open? But apparently it's a very encrypted laptop, so, it's safe and sound. But sadly, before they can end up leaving, the feds arrive. Yeah, like I said, Riri was an important figure, and while Riri didn't know she was making the machine for the government, apparently the professor in her metallurgy class challenged her to make it, and so she wound up making it anyway. And so she wound up just making it. Well, yeah, because she's the one that designed it, of course, people high in government are going to want to keep an eye on her. And sure enough, the feds arrive, and they want to arrest Shuri and Okoye for potentially kidnapping such a valuable asset. As such, the trio realize they need to get out of here. And so from here, they begin forming escape plans. Okoye wants to take herself and Shuri in a car that's in the garage, though Riri objects because apparently the car in there is important. But ultimately, they decide they're going to take it anyway, though Shuri ends up sabotaging by putting her autopilot in control of the car, and Shuri herself ends up taking a motorcycle. But of course, that raises the question, what's Riri going to do? What is Riri going to be flying? Well, it turns out she's got another project that she's been working on and off on over the last few years. What is it? It's a suit of armor, powered by an arc reactor. Yeah, if you haven't read the comics, this film is also the first appearance of the Marvel superhero Ironheart, who is supposed to essentially be, I want to say, the next Iron Man in the Marvel comics, and like with America Chavez in Multiverse of Madness, this is a character that had been introduced rather recently compared to other characters in the MCU. So the fact that they're now trying to integrate her into the Marvel Cinematic Universe proper, I think is really cool, and I'm going to admit this, when she first tries on I'm going to call the Proto-Ironheart armor, I think it looks pretty cool. It's clearly just a patchwork suit of armor. It doesn't even really look like an Iron Man-themed armor. The only thing that really makes it look like Iron Man at all is that she has an arc reactor in the chest, which, yeah, is supposed to be her own creation. The fact that she made one of those at all, I think, is impressive. But it's clearly just kind of held together by duct tape and hope. Well, figuratively speaking, there's no duct tape in the actual suit. But bottom line, it's clearly a proto suit in the highest regards. Still not fully complete, but still fully usable, as she has used it before, and apparently there's a whole YouTube channel dedicated to various sightings of her, and so she uses the weapons to take care of the feds in her lab and fly right on out of there. As such, it leads to a chase scene as Shuri, Okoye, and Riri end up just running around the city, and end up having to end up having to outthink the feds and send them off wherever they go. We get a scene of Riri flying too high to take out a drone. We get Okoye taking control of the car. We get Shuri having to dodge around things in a motorcycle. But ultimately, the end result, they manage to outrace the feds and seemingly get away scot-free. That is until they cross a bridge that's overhead a river, and Riri gets knocked out of the sky And before Shuri and Okoye can take care of her, they end up getting hit with a grenade that ends up causing a massive explosion of water that sends both their vehicles flying. Okoye ultimately managed to get out of it with minimal injuries, but Shuri ends up getting knocked out. She's ultimately fine, but yeah, she's out of commission. And same goes for Riri, as when she got pulled to the ground, she got knocked out as well. And sadly, the tether that was used to knock her out is dragging her into the water. Okoye manages to cut it before she actually gets pulled off the bridge, but this prompts a bunch of Talokan warriors to come jumping out of the water and proceed to fight Okoye. While she managed to fend off a good chunk of their numbers by herself, unfortunately, it's becoming clear that she might be a bit outmatched, as well. As the warriors she fought, she dealt them killing blows, and yet they got back up. One of their warriors was able to single-handedly kill a group of police officers that arrived on the scene, and when she fought one of their other big warriors, well, put simply, she was kind of outmatched. While she put up a good fight, it's clear that his physical prowess is far more advanced than hers, and because, like Namor has access to vibranium, his weapons are also a good match for Okoye. So put simply, yeah, this is not a battle that she will win. However, as such, when her battle ends with her getting thrown in the water, once again, the Talokan warriors want to go back to get Riri, but at this point, Shuri wakes up and immediately starts bargaining with these people, pretty much telling them, no, spare this girl, and if you really want someone, take us both, let me see your king. And so, the Talokan warriors decide, okay, fine, we'll just take you both alive, and you can talk to our king. And so they end up taking Shuri and Riri and end up taking them into the water, giving them essentially breathing masks so they don't drown. And sadly, since Okoye is on the other side of the bridge in the water herself, she can't really do anything to help them. And as such, after they get taken and Okoye returns to Wakanda and reports back to the Queen, but simply the Queen is not happy. Sorry, hold on a sec. Sorry, a cough drop is in my gums. Yeah, but yeah, once Okoye talks about how badly things got botched up, the Queen ends up stripping her of her rank and wants her to hand in her spear. Okoye begs and pleads with her to let her go back out there and save Shuri, but it's clear Amanda is just kind of at her wit's end as she pretty much just starts yelling at Okoye. And while the other members of the council do think that maybe they're being too harsh, especially since Okoye's service in the past has shown that she is very dedicated to Wakanda, well, again, Ramonda is not in a good state of mind, especially since the person that was kidnapped was her daughter, someone that she didn't even want going out in the field in the first place, and that combined with just all the other losses she sustained with the loss of her husband, her son, and now here she stands practically alone at the throne of Wakanda. Yeah, at this point she's done sacrificing everybody, and she is just not having any more loss. As such, she refuses to let Okoye back into the Dora Milaje, and so Okoye turns in her weapon and just walks off. As such, Ramonda decides that she wants to try and start tracking Shuri herself, but she needs some leads, which is where Agent Ross comes back into play, as the whole incident on the bridge did end up getting the attention of the feds, and the next thing they're there investigating, and they don't know about Talokan at all, as the outpost where they were mining for vibranium out in the ocean. Well, like I said, everybody died there before they could get a message out. I mean, one message got out, but it probably came out garbled or whatever. But bottom line, they don't know about Talokan, and they don't know about Talokan, and the way things look, it looked as though the Wakandans arrived and just essentially caused the scene. As such, Agent Ross is called onto it, and at the same time, his ex-wife is there, who's now his boss, who might have appeared in other MCU projects. I think she was in the after credit scene in Black Widow, but don't quote me on that. But the point is this: she is there. Things are uncut. She is there, and it's very much awkward for agent for Ross and her to be in the same place. However, as he begins investigating, he ends up finding Shuri's beads, which is supposed to be like the highly technological beads that Wakandans use that can heal or use to communicate, and he ends up taking them in secret. And so when Queen Ramonda ends up trying to track the beads, he ends up getting a call from them, and he manages to get his wife to pretty much just amscray, and he ends up telling Ramonda about the incident on the bridge. And while Ramonda still can't tell Agent Ross about Talokan and pretty much where and its involvement in all this, at the same time she is telling them that there is another player, about there is someone else out in the world with access to vibranium, and that's kind of where she leaves it. As such, she tells Agent Ross to let her know if anything occurs with the American government against Wakanda, and at the same and so he essentially becomes her mole. But in the meantime, she still has to find Shuri, and while she manages to use Shuri's AI technology to track her to the North Atlantic, sadly, it's still not enough, as it only managed to track her so far before the trail went cold. However, hold on, I'm looking through the notes. I did write this down. Hold on. Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. But yeah, so pretty much like I said, the earrings wound up tracking her to the North Atlantic, and it wanted to lose track of her there, but it was able to tell her that the Talokan people would wound up speaking Old Yucatan Mayan. As such, with that in mind, Queen Ramonda thinks she might know the perfect person to track Shuri. And sure enough, she ends up traveling to Haiti and finds who she thinks might be able to help her. Nakia from the first movie, who, I'm just gonna be honest, I completely forgot about this character. And at first I thought that was on me because apparently because Nakia was T'Challa's love interest in the first movie. But when I talked about this with some of my friends, apparently they revealed to me that she was only in like 2 scenes in the first Black Panther. So yeah, her influence was really not that big a thing in the first movie. So yeah, I feel sucky that I forgot about her. But considering her level of influence in the last movie, it makes sense why I think I would forget about her. But whatever. Queen Ramonda tracks her down, and she wants her help in finding Talokan and Shuri. And while Nakia is a bit reluctant to do this, eventually she does concede, and she does begin working on trying to gather information on Talokan and Namor, as she does end up traveling to another part of Haiti and talks to an old woman who is reported to see Namor, and apparently there are legends surrounding him, calling him Kukul Khan, who about the giant feathered serpent god or whatever. And how apparently around their metaphorical part of the woods, anytime that he is seen, there are people that disappear into the ocean, and pretty much it's clear that he is someone you don't want to screw with. And speak of the devil, we then cut to Shuri and Riri as they are both just kind of being set up in a cave and are waiting for Namor to see them. And sure enough, Shuri does get summoned to see Namor, and he's got a little hut in the cave, which I think looks nice, but it's full of old Mesoamerican artifacts, which Shuri is able to figure out actually do belong to Namor himself. As such, Namor does reveal his backstory and why exactly things are the way they are, because here's the thing, the people of Talokan all have blue skin out of the water, and all have to wear these, I want to say oxygen masks, but for them it has them breathing water. So, and yet Namor, well, he doesn't do that. In and out of the water, his skin looks normal, and he doesn't need a mask when he's out of the water. And on top of that, his own physicality is different from the rest of the Talokans, as he has pointy ears while the rest of them don't, and he has wings on his feet, which, yeah, they look silly. I'm not going to deny that. Even in the comics, they looked silly, so that's just, I guess, a silly aspect of the character no matter what. But put simply, he does finally give his backstory. It turns out the Talokans did once originally live on land, but sadly they were pushed out of their territory by Spanish conquistadors, and sadly the new area they moved to was lacking in resources, and little by little, Namor's people realized that they were going to die out unless they got help. As such, they wound up praying to their god Jacques, who directed them to a flower that had been growing underwater. A blue glowing flower that was clearly laced with some vibranium. Which what I kind of like is that how they use the flower is very similar to how the heart-shaped herb works with Wakanda, as they would end up taking the plant and grinding it up into a drink, which they dispersed to all the people. Now, Namor's mother originally did not want to take it, as she was pregnant with Namor at the time, but eventually they managed to convince her that she would need to take it, and stated that it would heal her son, and that with it he would be their new ruler, and so on and so forth. And so she wound up taking the drink, and they also wound up giving her a bracelet that was laced with a thread from the plant. So yeah, essentially it gave her more faith and willing to take it. And sure enough, like with the heart-shaped herb, when everybody wound up taking the drink, when everyone wound up taking the mixture, they all wound up seemingly dying, and then waking up with altered physiologies. But whereas the heart-shaped herb wound up giving its whoever utilized it enhanced strength, speed, and agility, the Namor's people, well, they wound up not being able to breathe air. They wound up getting enhanced abilities, of course, but because of their altered physiology, they could no longer live on land and wound up having to turn to the ocean. And sure enough, in the ocean they did thrive, and it was in the ocean that Namor was born. And it turns out, and for him, sure enough, when his mother wound up ingesting the plant, it wound up having its effect on wound up having an effect on Namor as well, as instead of being blue and needing to entirely stay in the ocean like the rest of his people, he wound up, like I said, getting the pointed ears, the wings on his feet, and he can operate on land or sea without needing an oxygen mask. And so, and just like the elder said, he was made the new ruler of their new society, which was, again, like I said, Talokan. However, even during all this, Namor's mother still longed for living on the land, and as a result, when she wound up dying, her last request was that she be buried on land. And so Namor wound up leading a congregation of people to bury her on land. And when they arrived, they found, well, slave traders. They found people abusing. They found people that were abusing other people, just hurting. Just essentially, it was just human cruelty at its finest, quote unquote. And sure enough, when the people operating it was a plantation. When one of the people operating the plantation sees the kid Namor with his congregation, they're wondering what the hell is that, and Namor immediately led an attack that pretty much wiped everybody out. With the last survivor there being a priest who called him excuse me, sorry about that. Anyway, like I said, a priest wound up calling him El Niños de Amor, which is supposed to mean child without love, and so that's how Namor got his name. That's how Namor got his name because, well, like he said, he has no love for the surface world. He didn't grow up there. He never knew anyone there, and his first major exposure to it was of humans abusing other humans because they needed free labor. So when that's your impression of the surface world, and based on the history of his own people, yeah, it's clear that he holds no love for this. It's clear that he does not give two shits about the surface world, and the only thing he really cares about are his people. And the thing is, another added bonus of his altered physiology was that he aged slower than everyone else. And the thing is, he's been alive since the 1500s, and yet he still looks like a young man. So it's clear that he's seen it. So he knows how the world operates, and all the time he's been there, and ever since that first time stepping on the land, he knew that one day the surface world might come for Talokan, as he feels as people continue expanding about, eventually they would turn their eyes to the ocean and might end up intruding on the Talokan, which is again his territory. So he's preparing the warriors of Talokan for that day it comes, and well, Now that the people of the surface world are looking for vibranium and have begun digging in the oceans, yeah, he's afraid that they'll come knocking at his door. As such, he doesn't want he wants to kill he wants to kill Riri, not because she could potentially make more, but also because of what her device represents. That eventually one day they'll just continue on, and his entire kingdom will suffer. And that actually is another thing I like about Namor. He's a lot more. Well, he is clearly a villain. He has more noble reasons for doing what he does because he is genuinely afraid that if the surface world continues expanding, it'll go into Talokan and his people will suffer. Especially helps that he has used the vibranium that they have at their disposal to make the lives of the people in Talokan better. He created a device that's supposed to be able to simulate the light of the sun down there, so they can at least get some light. They have they even show Shuri his whole vibrant society with one of the suits that he got from one of the divers from the rig that he and his people attacked. So that's kind of morbid. But sure enough, Talokan does look to be a very prosperous and strong nation, which, yeah, when Shuri goes around it actually does look very beautiful and very nice, especially with the music choice and just how serene everything looks floating in the water. But so, yeah, you do understand where Namor is coming from. He genuinely is afraid that his people will end up becoming exploited and their kingdom will fall to ruin. And so he believes that with Riri's device, that eventually more people are going to come, and he wants to wage a war with the service world, which is once again where Wakanda comes in, as he ends up proposing to Shuri that maybe Talokan and Wakanda can work together, as he wants to wage a war in the near future, and he believes Wakanda should take part. Shuri begins kind of wondering why. Asks him, well, what happens if Wakanda doesn't want to help you? And he pretty much makes it clear. Then we're gonna raise Wakanda to the ground. As yeah, he stated that Wakanda, as one of the reasons why Wakanda was considering, well, lamenting to him, was the fact that apparently not only does he have access to vibranium, but apparently he claims that he's got a crap ton of soldiers. That he's got hundreds of soldiers for each blade of grass that's on Wakanda. So he's not lacking in forces if he wanted to wage a war. He pretty much makes it clear that it's pretty much if you're not with us, you're against us type of deal. And so Shuri has to kind of ponder on this. Although, as a sign of friendship, he does end up giving Shuri the necklace it was given to her mother as a sign of respect, as she was probably one of the first people on the surface world to actually visit and see Talokan and everything inside it. So I do like that, but even Shuri admits that as long as she's down in Talokan, her people are never going to stop looking for her. Excuse me a second. Anyway, like I said, Shuri does state that as long as she's in Talokan, the Wakandan forces are going to try and come for her. Before things can continue, Namor is called away as someone wants to have a meeting with him. That person being Queen Ramonda. Yeah, it turns out that Nakia did eventually make progress in tracking down Shuri, and sure enough, she did find a back way to the caverns where the Talokan people were keeping Shuri and Riri. And as such, Nakia wound up contacting Ramonda, and Ramonda pretty much told her, go in and try and save my daughter. I'll cause a distraction for you. And this is the distraction. While Queen Ramonda is talking with Namor, Nakia ends up sneaking into the underwater cavern and manages to save Shuri and Riri. Though, unfortunately, she ends up killing one of the guards in the process, which, while Shuri does try to heal the guard, well, she doesn't have the adequate resources, and even the blast itself was meant to be lethal. Oh, yes, yeah, because she shot her with a sonic blaster. And the thing is, Shuri realizes that if this woman dies, well, it's going to probably be considered an act of war. So, yeah. While Shuri and Riri are saved, Wakanda is probably gonna pay for it much later on. And sure enough, while Shuri is reunited with her mother and Riri is brought into Wakanda for safety, well, once Namor finds the dead guard, he is ready to go out for blood, and sure enough, he does end up retaliating against Wakanda in a big way. Excuse me again. So yeah, like I said, Namor's out for blood. As such, while Shuri and Riri are brought back to Wakanda, with Riri getting the grand tour, though she makes it clear she wants to go home as quickly as possible. Well, shit does hit the fan quickly as Namor ends up launching an attack immediately on Wakanda. Hold on a sec. Again, sorry, so sorry. I am again really sorry about that. That's doggy interruptions. They are annoying. But anyway, like I said, Namor responds in kind as he ends up leading an all-out assault on Wakanda, flooding a lot of the streets, sending out explosions of water from several buildings. Pretty much it's just complete pandemonium and chaos with with a lot of implied drownings. Thankfully, people are on the scene to take care of the situation as M'Baku from the well, I want to say banished tribe from the last movie. He and his people were in the middle of Wakanda and saw the damage, so they were able to get civilians. On top of that, Okoye and Nakia were in the middle of town square when it all went down, so they're running around gathering as many civilians as they can. And Riri and the Queen. And Riri and the Queen. Sorry, just realized my notes are over here. Riri and Queen Ramonda are taking care of flight drones to pretty much go around and gather as many people as they can. So there is damage control going around, but yeah, still things are going. But yeah, it's still it's still a lot of chaos, and it is implied that quite a few people die, and the Talakans are kind of at the forefront of it as they lead a charge. And sure enough, Namor comes out of the water to get ready for battle, and M'Baku, who was one of the people in the meeting in the earlier meeting who vouched for just straight up killing Namor, sees Namor right there and has every intent of just going right at him and hitting him over the head with his staff. Only when he does that, Namor just casually blocks it, which breaks his staff, or turning around and decking M'Baku in the chest and punching him so hard that it breaks through his armor and sends him flying into a stall on the other side of a small area of water. So yeah, very strong guy. Yeah, and sure enough, Shuri and another warrior whose name I do not remember for the life of me, they end up getting in their own flight drone and try going after Namor, but Namor's too skilled. In the air, he's able to effortlessly maneuver around their shots without any issue, and in the water, well, he's even faster. So they're not really making any progress with him, and sadly, things go from bad to worse when he eventually reaches the throne room of Wakanda, where Queen Ramonda and Riri are. As when they're there, he immediately goes on the offensive as he gets a giant satchel of those water bombs and tosses it right into the throne room, pretty much flooding the whole place, or at the very least. As such, the onset of water causes the glass floor to break, and Ramonda and Riri to fall through. Ramonda ends up waking up underwater, but Riri does not. As such, Queen Ramonda ends up grabbing Riri and dragging her to the surface, but unfortunately, it's a little too late, at least for the Queen. As it goes back with Shuri, she and the other lady from the Dormelahe, again, I am so sorry I don't remember her name. They wound up their airship wound up getting blasted out of the sky, and so they wound up getting picked up with other survivors. But they saw what happened in the throne room and went to investigate. And unfortunately, by the time Shuri and Co arrive, both Queen Ramonda and Riri are unconscious. They immediately start doing CPR with the beads to try and get them back up and running. And while with Riri it's successful, Queen Ramonda not so much. As Shuri is just there watching, she begins pleading, no, and she begins once again crying in anger. But as they continue trying to revive Queen Ramonda, again, sorry, there's a puppy over there causing mayhem. She's trying to get comfortable. Namor immediately flies in and pretty much makes it clear that pretty much just makes out demands that can be summed up as, that pretty much he just says that it's like, I warned you. like, I warned you, because in the earlier meeting he didn't threaten to kill her if she didn't comply with his demands. He's like, she caused this, and I'll return with all my forces in 1 week's time. Bury your dead and mourn your losses and prepare for my return. And Shuri, you're the queen now. Before he flies away. And while the forces of Talokan are gone, the damage they did is still severe. Wakanda is still repairing itself from the assault, and once again they have to bury one of their royalty as there's another funeral service held for Queen Ramonda. And it's clear Shuri is not taking this just as bad as T'Challa, maybe even worse. Because with T'Challa, it was a random sickness that killed him. With Ramonda, she has a face to go with her hate. And while during the funeral M'Baku does try to comfort her and offer her guidance, it becomes clear that she is ready to go after Namor, guns blazing. As such, once the funeral service is over, Shuri and Riri return back to Shuri's lab, and Shuri decides that maybe now is the time to make a new Black Panther. Which even Riri's like, "I thought you said the Black Panther was dead," because earlier when they were captured, she asked if the Black Panther was coming. And Shuri thinks she might have a way to get around the whole lack of heart-shaped herbs thing, as she now is ready to once again renew her research into creating an artificial herb. As such, and thankfully, she now has a lead. Remember the bracelet that she got from Namor? Well, the thread that it was used was, again, from the plant that turned the people of Talokan into the fish people that they are. And it's kind of clear that plant, like the heart-shaped herb, was grown in soil that has vibranium. So if the strand she has is anything like the vibranium they have in store, they could use it as a baseline to create a new heart-shaped herb. And so she begins experimenting with it, and pretty much tells Riri they got to prepare for battle because like Namor said, within a week the shit's gonna hit the fan and they need to repair. And so Riri ends up using the resources available to her in the lab, and she ends up creating a new suit of armor, one a bit more advanced than her previous suit. One that clearly is taking a bit more inspiration from another iron-suited hero, at least when it's being made. I'll talk about that later, and excuse me once again. So yeah, anyway, like I said, Shuri begins her experiments anew, and Riri begins building a new suit of armor. And on top of that, in the case of Okoye, she ends up giving Okoye a bit more of an advantage, as earlier in the movie, as part of her advancements as part of Shuri's plans to improve the forces of Wakanda, she had actually wanted making another suit of armor, one that she called the Midnight Angel. Originally, Okoye had no nice things to say about that. She still didn't. But considering the current circumstances, Shuri believes that Okoye should wear the armor. And Okoye ends up with Okoye even getting a second one for the other Dora Milaje soldier whose name I keep forgetting. So yeah, it looks like forces are actually improving, and sure enough, Shuri's experiments with creating an artificial heart-shaped herb actually do seem to bear fruit, as she ends up finally getting a sequence in place that does seem to be creating a very more stable means of healing. And sure enough, she ends up having the second heart-shaped herb printed, and it's successful as it starts glowing like a regular heart-shaped herb, which Nakia, who came to Shuri's lab to see what was going on, ends up seeing this and even congratulates Shuri, because doing this essentially gives Wakanda back the heart-shaped herb that they had before, and can continue allowing the Black Panther to come about. But of course, you can't really create the means of having a Black Panther without having an actual Black Panther. And as such, since Shuri is now the last remaining member of the royal family, she ends up taking the medicine. She doesn't go through the whole ritual like T'Challa did, so she doesn't get buried or anything. But instead she does end up lying down in her lab. And they do end up pounding it they end up pounding it, mixing it together, and creating a drink which Shuri ends up taking. And sure enough, she does undergo the ritual as she seems to pass out and enter the spirit world. Only when she enters it, the place whatever area she's in takes on the form of the throne room, that throne room while when the floor was flooded. She ends up with Shuri swimming to the surface, and we again, I still love the design of the spirit world, and she ends up seeing the Wakandan throne. And at first, she thinks she's gonna see her mother. She calls out to the throne and even gets steps forward. Only it ain't her mom sitting at the throne. Instead, it's her cousin. Yep. Sitting at the throne is Killmonger. And Shuri is horrified that he is there, that he's even sitting there at all. To which Killmonger responds, "Why'd you take the heart-shaped herb?" It's like, you don't believe in all this stuff. You didn't think that there was going to be a spirit world. So why'd you take it? Shuri tries to defend her action. Like, Shuri doesn't want to give an explanation to him, but he keeps probing her, and sure enough, yeah, she admitted that she really wanted to see her mother, but the fact that she's seeing Killmonger is concerning her, and he openly tells her, "I'm here because you called me." As such, he begins kind of laying down everything that's happened to Shuri about how what she really wants is what she really wants isn't to see that what she really doesn't want is justice for what happened to Wakanda. She wants vengeance. She wants Namor's head on a pike. And when he says this, like, well, I guess we're not that different. And Shuri does try to defend herself, but Killmonger ain't having any of her shit. As he keeps telling her no, it's not. It's like, no, you did this for vengeance. You want to do that. And he pretty much just kind of lays everything out. Like, Shuri talks about how it's Killmonger's fault that her brother is dead, that Wakanda didn't have a protector, as he's the one that burned all the other heart-shaped herbs in the first movie. But he keeps saying no. But he pretty much just throws that back in her face and says, like, I did what I had to do, and don't you dare. It's like, and don't blame me for your mother's death. Don't blame me for your mother's death. Don't make it like that. And he pretty much just compares her to all the other kings. That other kings would not be as heartfelt as Shuri is being. That many of them would have kowtowed to Namor's demands. That they would have killed Riri to defend themselves. Hell, her dad killed his own brother just to maintain Wakanda's secrecy. And he even starts bad-mouthing T'Challa as he felt T'Challa was too sentimental. As we saw in previous films, T'Challa did find the man who was responsible for his father's death, and yet he let him live. And now here we have Shuri, who's in a position to exact retribution and vengeance for the killer of her mother. But what's she gonna do? Is she going to get vengeance? So what's she gonna do? Is she gonna be sentimental like her brother, or as Killmonger puts it, get things done? Now, and well, we don't end up seeing this scene till later. But Shuri's response, I want Killmonger to beg at my feet as I watch him die. And yeah, that's a scary line. It's at this point that Shuri ends up waking up, and Nakia and Riri began checking on her, and Nakia even asked who she saw, but Riri says that she didn't actually see anybody, and she just in anger thinks that that the whole thing was for nothing, that she didn't actually do anything, but in her anger she ends up punching a mannequin, and sending it flying straight into a cavernous wall. Yep, the artificial heart-shaped herb worked. She now has superpowers, and sure enough, with these added powers, she's ready. It's time they felt that she got a suit. In the meantime, back with Wakanda, during the funeral, M'Baku wound up actually approaching Shuri about moving the denizens of Wakanda to. Hold on, I need to go to my notes. Yeah, they want to move to Jabari land. That's what his nation. That's what the tribe is called. To Jabari land because well, again, Wakanda is still in turmoil, and at this point they're afraid of retribution. So everyone from Wakanda is being moved to Jabari. But even then, they're kind of running out of space, and people are still wondering what they're going to do with Queen Ramonda dead. How are they going to institute? Who's going to be leading them? Who's going to be leading the charge forward? And sure enough, as the council is discussing all this with M'Baku, a ship ends up flying overhead the meeting ground. Everyone looks up. The ship and a hatch on the bottom of the ship opens up, and who comes flying down? But Shuri. decked out in her new Black Panther uniform. And I gotta say, I like Shuri's Black Panther outfit. It has enough of the original imagery from the other costumes so that it's still recognizable as the Black Panther. But it's slim, but befitting Shuri's body types. It's a bit more slimmer and a bit more. It's a bit slimmer and a bit more, I want to say stout, I suppose. Well, and also outlined with gold and silver trimmings, which I think really works well in accentuating just how not only the regality of the costume, but I guess in some cases the power of it. And we even later on see that Shuri has integrated those little shock arm things that she had from other movies into them. So I think that's really cool. I dig it. It's a really cool costume. And to kind of test the prowess of to kind of test Shuri's prowess as the Black Panther, M'Baku approaches her and they get into a pseudo arm wrestling match. And the fact that she's even able to overpower him at all makes M'Baku realize, yep, we got us a new Black Panther. As such, with Shuri now with Shuri now taking up the mantle of Black Panther, that still becomes a matter of it's a matter of how they're going to deal with Namor. His forces still outnumber Wakanda 1,000,000 to 1, and they're still recovering from that last attack. Well, Shuri actually has a solution. You see, while she was developing the heart-shaped herb, Shuri and Riri actually talked about Namor's abilities and physiology, and it turns out that they think that they've got something on him. You see, Namor's people are usually best Namor's people seem to operate their best underwater. They draw oxygen from the water around them to continue to operate at all. But Namor's kind of a mix of both worlds. He can breathe on land and can breathe air, but he can also absorb oxygen from the water. And so Shuri and Riri realize that somehow the added bonus of having prowess on land and sea is what gives him all of his amazing abilities, including the enhanced strength, speed, and etc. And so they begin wondering, what if we dried him out? Essentially, take the water out of him. They think that if they can dry him out enough and keep him away from the water, well, then he'll lose his incredible powers, and they'll be able to take him down. As such, Shuri admits that this is going to be their plan, and she admits that they're not going to fight her on Wakandan land, they're not going to fight Namor on Wakandan land, but instead they're going to draw him out somewhere in the middle of the ocean. But there's still the problem of not just Namor, but his people. You see, the thing is, after being humbled by Namor in his first encounter, M'Baku begins to realize that Namor is kind of a bigger deal than they realize. Going back to the name that his people call him, Kukulkan, well, that name, like I said, means feathered serpent god. And that's what Namor's people see him as, a god. If they manage to kill Namor, well, that kind of means that his people will have Wakanda in their crosshairs for a good long while. By which he means forever. Wakanda is going to be branded an enemy of Talokan. And again, considering Talokan's forces greatly outnumber Wakanda's in and of themselves, yeah, it makes it clear that killing Namor will come back to bite them even worse than just killing one of their soldiers. Hold on again. Got my cough drop. Anyway, yeah, Shuri ends up talking with M'Baku about this affair alone, and she pretty much makes it clear that she doesn't give two shits what the repercussions are. Her mother is dead, Namor is still alive, ergo she wants his head on a pike, and M'Baku is going to help her whether he wants to or not. And M'Baku, well, begrudgingly complies. As such, the forces of Wakanda end up pooling their resources and get the plan in motion. Okoye and the other Dora Milaje soldier are given the Midnight Angel armor, which admittedly looks pretty cool. Riri ends up gearing up in her new Ironheart armor, which, I'm going to be honest, I'm not a big fan of the second model Ironheart armor because it looks a lot... Because that armor really looks less like Iron Man and more like she just put armor on a Power Ranger suit, which, I don't know, I don't really like that. I know the idea is that she built the armor herself, which I respect that. But at the same time, if she's supposed to be... Same time, when I think of Iron-themed superhero in the Marvel Universe, I don't think Power Rangers, so, So I'm gonna knock it for that. And as such, the forces of Wakanda get set in motion. And how they plan to lure Namor and his forces to the middle of the ocean is that they wound up repairing the vibranium detection device and pretty much just turn it on, bring it to the middle of the ocean, and then set a trap for everyone. And so everyone's getting ready to do that. But before everyone leaves, Nakia does get another moment alone with Shuri, and she does try to get her to open up about what she really saw when she took the heart-shaped herb. But Shuri is still clamming up. She's not saying a thing about it. As such, they immediately do begin the plan as they activate the vibranium detector, and sure enough, once the Telecons learn that one of these devices has been turned on, they immediately go to the spot. Immediately go to wherever it is to pretty much deal with whoever they feel is behind it. Again, excuse me a second. Sorry about that, puppy again. Anyway, not puppy, Xander, but whatever. Bottom line, they end up going to where the vibranium detection device is, and before they can take care of it, the Wakandans launch their trap, as they have a ship on the surface that immediately hits them with a sonic. That begins hitting them with sonic waves under the water, which disorients all the Telecon warriors underwater, forcing them to come to the surface. As such, the people of Wakanda immediately get into position, and we get an honestly really cool fight scene as the Telecon warriors are climbing up the hull of the ship they're on and trying to reach the warriors, and they keep knocking them down. We see Shuri actually get some really kick-ass moves in as the Black Panther, as we see her actually jump off the ship and just cling to the side as she just jumps from warrior to warrior, slashing them up and shooting them with her arm gauntlets. It's honestly really cool. We see the Wakandan forces get some good licks in on the fighters. We see Riri Williams actually kicking ass in her Ironheart armor, which, I might not like the design of it, but you can't deny it's effective. So I do like that. And of course, Namor is out in there trying to take out Wakanda warriors and flying around, which is when their second part of the trap springs, as immediately a ship operating on autopilot begins chasing Namor. With his increased speed, he tries outrunning it, but Riri is able to catch up with him and ends up shooting him out of the sky and causing him to land right inside the ship. As such, once he's inside, Shuri ends up jumping onto the ship himself, and she ends up confronting Namor again. And upon getting inside, we soon learn what Shuri's plan is. They've converted the ship into a sauna. And sure enough, Namor's beginning to sweat a little. Of course, he immediately gets angry at this and starts stabbing the ship with his spear, which again is tipped with vibranium. And so this finally gets Shuri to essentially can actually confront Namor himself, while also making her AI direct the ship towards the nearest desert. In the meantime, back with Wakandan forces, they plan to make the retreat because now they got Namor. They think everything's good, but sadly they're not able to make much distance, as before they can make a getaway, one of Namor's soldiers, a woman by the name of Namora, ends up managing to destroy the sonic emitter, and with the forces underwater no longer being screwed up by the vibrations underwater, they end up managing to hit the bottom of the ship with a ton of water bombs, which pretty much leaves it dead in the water and free for the pickings for all the other Telecon soldiers. As such, this is when the Midnight Angels end up coming in and end up fighting out more of the soldiers, with Okoye actually getting another round with the main soldier she fought earlier in the movie. But sadly, despite their added help with the Midnight Angels, it's clear the Telecons are greatly outnumbering the Wakandan forces, and it's clear the only way they can get a win here is if Shuri can take down Namor. And sure enough, while Shuri does put up a good fight with Namor inside the ship, his attacks on the ship's interior do manage to essentially cause enough damage to the ship that it explodes. So thankfully it was close enough to the shore of the desert they were flying to for the remains of the ship to fly right over to the beach. As such, Shuri and Namor continue to fight on the beach, and sadly, in the beginning, Namor still seems to overpower her, as he still is faster, stronger, more agile, and is just seeming to overpower her. But Shuri is able to use her technology to actually get more advantages on him. Managed to get some claw marks in. She managed to tear off one of his wings, and it looks like it genuinely hurts like hell, because She actually, because again, they're like little wings, but they're part of his body. She just straight up ripped it off his foot. That's gotta hurt. That's gotta hurt. She manages to scratch him with his claws and digging into him, getting his face. It's and even through the battle, it looks like as though she's actually gaining an advantage to the point where she just starts wiping the floor with him, but he almost manages to get a final win in as he managed to grab what's a part of his spear and stabs it right through Shuri into a rock. However, even when he gets this supposed victory, them being on a desert and him already being dried up, but being a bit dried out when they arrive, finally starts to get him as he's actually getting exhausted. With all the injuries he sustained in battle, he thinks he just needs to get back to the water and he'll be good. However, Shuri, as he begins wandering, he begins hobbling away, but Shuri manages to work through the pain that she's in, and she manages to break off another spear that she's able to slide right out of it. And I'm guessing the suit has healing technologies in it, because otherwise what she does next would be impossible. But the suit ends up fixing itself up, and I'm guessing it heals her wounds, and she ends up flipping in front of Namor, and he's ready to go round 2, even gets ready for fisticuffs. But ultimately, Shuri just says Wakanda Forever, crosses her arms over her chest, activates a mechanism, and what's left of the ship's engines roars to life, and hits Namor right in the back. As flames engulf him, Shuri ends up getting her mask back on, so she's completely covered. But simply, Namor, we're getting fried sushi tonight. Namor is ultimately not dead, but it's clear that he's close to it, as he's now just lying on the ground, clearly in a lot of pain. Shuri ends up grabbing his spear again, and she holds it to his neck with the intent to just stab it right into him. And as she does this, she just begins recalling everything that's happened throughout the movie, all the damage he's done, the time they spent together, her telling a story, her remembering her mother, her brother, everything. But as she holds the spear to her neck, she hears her mother's voice. When she looks up, she has a vision of her mother in the spirit world. And her mother just tells her, Shuri, show him who we are. And this compels Shuri to not kill him. In this case, instead, she demands that he yield. That if he yields right here and now, then Wakanda will not only keep Talakan's secrets, but they'll maintain the oceans, and they'll also maintain the oceans and essentially keep up peaceful relations. They'll support Talakan, but only if Namor yields to her. While Namor is quiet at first, Shuri tells him, vengeance has consumed us both. Let's not let it consume our people. And with that, Namor yields. Now such, back with the Wakandans and Talakans, they are the Talakan people have greatly outnumbered Wakandan forces, and they're just backed into a corner on the ship with it looking like they were going to finally die. But that's when Shuri and Namor fly in on another ship, and Namor pretty much tells his people to stand down and that they're just going to go home. As such, Shuri ends up yelling out Wakanda Forever, and from there, everything is resolved. The Talakan people end up going home. Wakanda returns back to Wakanda so they can lick their wounds and repair. And from here, the film kind of gets into a few epilogues. Riri is finally sent back home, though she's not allowed to bring her armor with her because, well, while it is impressive, it's made from Wakandan tech, and, well, they can't let that get out there in the world, so it's got to stay in Wakanda. But to make up for it, they do end up giving her... Shuri did manage to get her car repaired, so she's able to take that home with her, which is sentimental to her because the car was originally owned by her dad. And after that, Wakanda ends up holding that ritual where they honor the new Black Panther / ruler of Wakanda, which they assume which is what that thing in the fountain where the new ruler stands up and anyone can challenge them and so forth, which everyone there assumes that Shuri will show up to defend her title, but instead, she sends M'Baku there, who immediately says that the Black Panther has other things to attend to, and that he challenges for the right to be king. Which something I like is that no one looks angry that he's there. If anything, they're just like, oh, good. If anything, they're all just kind of proud of him, which makes sense because he fought valiantly with them through Killmonger and Namor. At that point, I think they think he's cool, even if they don't entirely agree with him. In the meantime, we also get some prologue on Agent Ross, who I kind of forgot to talk about later on, but put simply, he kind of got found out. It turns out that his director wound up having his. It turns out that remember the beads that Ross picked up at the crime scene. Yeah, his ex-wife had them bugged. She actually saw them first and had them bugged and put back. And so, sure enough, every conversation Ross has had with the people of Wakanda, she was privy to. And throughout the movie, like I said, the Americans believe that Wakanda was behind all the attacks and so forth, and so they were ready to take military action to get rid of them. But Ross continued advocating for Wakanda, and while he did seem to cool things enough for them to get all this, for them to not immediately wage all-out war, when Queen Ramonda died, well, his boss immediately came knocking at his door and wanted answers as to what was really going on. And when Ross didn't have any for her, well, she had him arrested, not just for hiding information, but for being in contact with people that they shouldn't have been in contact with. And sure enough, in the epilogue, Ross is being hauled away to some prison, I don't know where. But his transport ends up getting stopped because a tree has been knocked over in the middle of the road. And when the officers in charge end up investigating, something immediately takes them out. And as Ross is freaking out, the back of the transport vehicle opens, and it turns out it's Okoye in the Midnight Angel armor. Who's there to rescue him, most likely to take him back to Wakanda. And so there's that epilogue. But the final epilogue, and the one that ultimately kind of brings everything full circle, is with Shuri. As Shuri where Shuri wound up going was not to someplace in Wakanda, but to Haiti, as she has gone to Haiti to go with Nakia, because, well, she believes it's time to finally move on, as she ends up having Nakia set up the whole ceremony to burning the funerary garments. And while Nakia originally volunteers to join Shuri thinks that this is something she has to do alone. And so Shuri ends up going to the beach near Nakia's home, finds the fire that was set up, and takes her funerary garb and burns it. And from there, we actually get a very beautiful scene where there's no music, no dialogue, just the camera closing in on Shuri as she just kind of kneels by the fire. And we get various clips of T'Challa from his previous appearances interacting with Shuri, and just interacting with Shuri, the good times they had, basically his accomplishments, the times they confided in each other. It's just memories of times they've had together. And as the garb burns, Shuri cries. Finally ready to accept the death of her brother. And from there, the film ends. Although, of course, since this is a Marvel movie, we got our after credits scene. And sure enough, this one actually happens directly after the immediate ending. As Shuri is still sitting by the pyre, Nakia ends up coming up, only she has a child with her. Specifically, her son. It turns out Nakia and T'Challa had a kid. A kid that they didn't want anyone to know about. And the thing is, Nakia knew, and the thing is, when T'Challa realized that he was dying, he did confide in Nakia and his son about what was going to happen, and as a result of this, they were prepared when T'Challa finally passed on. However, T'Challa did not want the people of Wakanda to know he had a kid yet, as apparently he felt that it wasn't the right time. And as such, the thing is, one of the things they touched on in this movie is that Nakia was not at T'Challa's funeral. Well, apparently that was by T'Challa's own request. He did not want her to be there with the son. Because again, like I said, he didn't believe it was that the time was right to reveal him yet, and so and as such, she wound up skipping the funeral at his own request, and they had their own ceremony there. And as such, Shuri is just kind of in shock about this, and even asked, "Did my mother know?" And said, "Yes, she did." Because that's actually kind of another thing I liked, as in the earlier scene when Queen Ramonda tried having the ceremony with Shuri. She was gonna tell Shuri something before they got interrupted by Namor. So I do like that. Apparently, it was hinting at this, but sure enough, Shuri wants to talk. Sure enough, Shuri and her nephew finally begin talking, and she begins and her nephew introduces himself as Toussaint, and he just kind of seems like a regular nice kid, and he just seems like a nice kid. I like that. He just got he even said she says that's a good name, and he asks, "What's your name?" Shuri. It's like, "Oh, that's a cool name, I guess." It's cute. I love it. But he also asks, "Can you keep secrets?" And she says, "I'm great at keeping secrets." Toussaint looks to his mother and looks back to Shuri and says, "Toussaint is just my Haitian name. My real name is Prince T'Challa, son of King T'Challa." And Riri smiles with more tears in her eyes. And the film ends once again. So, yeah. That was Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and did I like it? Yes, I liked it a lot, actually. Here's the thing. One of the things that people were worried about, or at least that's what I heard, about the movie was how they were going to handle the idea, basically, how they were going to handle Chadwick Boseman's death. Because in the advertising for Wakanda Forever, they made it clear that a big part of the movie was going to be dealing with T'Challa not being there anymore. That he was gone, that he would be gone. But the thing is, this is also a Marvel movie. And not to knock Marvel movies, because I love the MCU. Otherwise, why would I be doing these vlogs? But the thing is, when it comes to superhero projects, especially stuff in the MCU, there's a fickle line between having a respectful property that honors the memory of someone that you knew and a big blockbuster moneymaker. And as such, if done the wrong way, what could have started as a movie created to create good sentiment can easily become something, well, cheap. And as such, it did kind of make it look like. And one of the fears that I had when waiting to see this movie was that it might not be able to, that it felt that maybe it would stray too far into one side of trying to remember that there's a big blockbuster superhero movie versus being a film to honor the death of one of their main cast. But thankfully, this film kind of satiated. Essentially, the film quelled those fears. I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong terminology here, but put simply, the film was not only a great blockbuster superhero movie, but a great film to honor Chadwick Boseman's memory. I think what made it work is how much they tried to parallel Chadwick Boseman's death with T'Challa's death, or more specifically, T'Challa with Chadwick Boseman. Like especially with the case of T'Challa's sickness. In reality, when Chadwick Boseman was diagnosed with leukemia, he didn't tell anybody about it. He kept doing his regular thing. In interviews, he was just as excitable as ever. And even while he was getting treatment for leukemia, he wanted providing voice work for the Marvel show What If, which I recommend looking up if you haven't seen it yet. It may not be a perfect show, but I think it's still fun. So he did not tell anyone what was going on, because I'm guessing he was hoping he would beat it. But ultimately he didn't tell nobody knew that he was sick until he finally passed on. And so to have it be a similar case to T'Challa, that he wound up getting sick and just kind of suffered in silence until he eventually had to ask someone for help, it kind of makes, I do find that to be respectful. And here's another thing I found interesting throughout the movie is that when you see the characters grieving or are feeling sorrow, none of it feels fake. It all feels real. Every scene where they are grieving or mourning or are sad, it really feels like it's not just the characters who are mourning for T'Challa. It feels like these are the actors mourning for Chadwick Boseman. And considering that even the casting crew admitted that while filming this film was hard because of the grief connected to Chadwick Boseman's death, that they managed to funnel that grief well into the roles, because every moment where they talk solemnly about him, where they try to remember all the good times they had with him, the memory of him, what he meant to them, all of it feels natural and works, because it feels like that this isn't them just reading lines from a script. This feels like exactly what they're going through. Well, maybe not exactly what they're going through, because of course these are characters. The characters are going to be different from the actors, but it does feel like the grief they're feeling, the sorrow, but also them trying to accept things and move on. It feels like these are what these people are actually going through. Nothing feels forced or fake. It really does feel momentous. And when they do remember T'Challa and they do talk about him, it really does feel like they're not just talking about T'Challa, but Chadwick Boseman. The final scene when Shuri burns the robe and cries as she remembers T'Challa, it doesn't feel like they're just saying, okay, now you just got to tear up here. It really feels like the actor is saying goodbye to him, and as she remembers him, it doesn't just feel like her remembering him. It feels like it's remembering Chadwick Boseman and everything and what he contributed to the MCU. I like that. It feels so emotional and heartfelt. It doesn't feel fake. Even by the end, when you see it, it really does. It feels like it gets you right here. When I first saw this movie, I admit I didn't end up crying as much as others, but it really did hit me harder than I thought it would. And even then, when I first saw it, the people sitting next to me, it clearly got to them, because I looked over at certain points in the movie, and they were crying. It really did get to them, and I'm not saying that to mock them. No, 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 no. I think that this shows the power of the movie, because these are emotional moments, and they don't sugarcoat it. They don't try and play it up for the sake of, this character dies, we need to honor the memory. No, it feels like genuine human emotion. These aren't just people reacting to, oh, we have to honor the dead because they were a great hero. No, these are people who are close to this person, who want to honor them because he meant so much to them. And it works. It works so well. And kind of going off of that, one of the central themes that this film seems to go through is how grief and loss can affect us. I'm going to my notes because I actually did write this down. The film deals with a great deal with feelings of loss, grief, vengeance, and acceptance. And when it comes down to loss and grief, the characters deal with it in their own unique ways. Queen Ramonda, when she becomes queen of Wakanda, while she deals with it better than others, it's clear that the loss has still hit her hard. But when she became the new queen of Wakanda, she began closing off Wakanda once more from the outside world. They were still connected to it because of what T'Challa did, but at the same time, it's clear that she holds no love for the outside world, and ultimately is only doing this because it's what her son wanted. Otherwise, she doesn't give two shits about it. And ultimately, it causes her to cling closer to that which she still has. She tries spending more time with Hold on a sec. Don't just love coughing fits. But like I said, yeah, her grief causes her to cling closer to what she has, and that causes her to go try and reach out to Shuri more. Which does help explain why she doesn't want Shuri going to the field. She's already lost so many, and as a result, when she blows up on Okoye later because Shuri was taken by the Talokans, it really does. Yes, it does feel somewhat irrational because Okoye has done a lot for Wakanda, but it makes sense. In her own words, because essentially she lost everyone close to her. She lost her husband. She lost her son, and now it looks like she might lose her daughter. She has lost so much, and yet she's lost so much, and she's just trying to hold it together as best as she can. But it's clear that all of the grief is getting to her. Or like the scene where she freaks out. I didn't write down every single line she wrote, which I recommend looking the scene up if you can. It's a really damn good scene and very emotionally charged, very powerful, and the actress who plays Queen Ramonda puts her all into it. But one line I was able to get right down, and one that I think is very powerful, if I can find it. Here it is. I am the queen of the most powerful nation. My family is gone. Have I not sacrificed enough? She is just like, you can just feel the sorrow in her voice, having to face the reality that she may now lose her daughter as well. Like, you can just see her just so angry and so sad. But ultimately, it's that sorrow that pushes her to fight for her family more, to continue taking risks. And by the end, she chooses. By the end, she does try to still move on. She does try to accept what's happened. She's the one that tries to compel Shuri to let go of to perform the ritual, and states that, and even claims about how performing it made it feel like T'Challa was there with her again. And again, on top of that, she even still had her heart in the end, as when Namor attacked the throne room and she and Riri almost drowned. She wound up saving Riri. She wound up saving Riri at the cost of her own life. So it's an interesting dynamic that showcases the turmoil she's going through, but also how she tries to move on. That she does try to move past this grief and grow. And even going off on other aspects, let's talk about Nakia. Well, Nakia doesn't appear very. Well, Nakia does have a more prominent role in this movie than she did in the last one. It is still a small role, but one scene that I loved in this movie is after she brings Shuri back to Wakanda. There's a scene with her and Okoye where they just sit down and talk about why she wasn't at T'Challa's funeral. And again, leads to a very well-acted scene where she talks about how, to everyone else, he was a king. He was King T'Challa, the Black Panther. But to her, she was something more. She was someone that she loved, that she cared about. And now he's gone, now he's gone. And she talks about how when she lost him, most likely during the snap in Infinity War, she just needed time for herself. So, and imagine this, if you will. Imagine having just lost someone in a great battle, only to get them back 5 years later, and then you lose them again. Imagine the turmoil that would do to you. And Nakia's actress just portrays it perfectly. Portrays this warrior who is trying so desperately to deal with this but it's clear that it's still something that she struggles with. It's something that she's tried working through, but at the same time, it's clear that the burn that T'Challa left is still fresh, and she portrays it perfectly. Which, of course, brings us to the main character of our movie, Shuri. Shuri is the one that deals with the most grief, with the most shit throughout this movie. When it comes to Shuri, how she dealt with T'Challa's grief was by essentially trying to move on, pretend that nothing happened. In her own words, like she said, if she thought about T'Challa for too long, she got angry. She wanted to burn the world, as she put it, because in her own eyes, this was an injustice. But in this case, she had no one to blame. There was no central target, and as such, how she tried dealing with the grief was by essentially trying to pretend he never existed. As a consequence of that, she kept trying to ignore the past. She kept trying to move on, but at the same time, it's clear that she never let go of T'Challa. Even when her mother kept trying to talk to her about moving on in the ceremony, well, she didn't listen. If anything, as one of the things that made her one of the things that made her ultimately, like, another thing that showcased her loss. She doesn't like. It's like they made it like they stated that she apparently was not a firm believer in their god Best, but after the death of T'Challa, it's clear that she doesn't have any belief at all. In fact, there's one going back to the scene where the ritual. She talks about after her mother talks about how when she burned her funerary garb and she felt like T'Challa was there. Shuri just said that was just a construct your mind created to make you feel better. To which Ramonda replies with, "What construct does your mind create when you think of your brother? Does it offer comfort or torment?" It's a very loaded question, but really one that gets to the heart of it. Shuri, the best way that Shuri is creating her own little prison, her own prison of grief, where she just feels nothing but pain about what happened to her brother. And by the end, and throughout the whole movie, it feels like she's just desperately trying to not let go. It's part of the reason why she wants the Black Panther to stay dead, because her brother is dead. It once more feeds into the whole my brother is dead, there is no justice in the world, and so the Black Panther is dead. Again, she's angry, but she doesn't have a target. It's not until her mother dies at the beginning of the third act that Shuri now finally has a target. She now has a reason to want to fight. And in this case, it's to get Namor's head on a pike. It's what finally convinces her to recreate the heart-shaped herb and don the Black Panther gear. But again, it's not because she's moving on. It's now because she has a target. She now has something she can take her rage out on, and that something is Namor. And throughout the third act, when she's gearing up, ready to take Namor down, it kind of gets scary. When M'Baku questions her about her methods, he tries telling her, "Look, I understand what you're going through, and it's not like your mom's death shouldn't be avenged, but this is not what she would want." To which Shuri responds with, and I did write this down again, so apologies. I wrote a few pages of this. Where is it? It's like, she pretty much says, "My mother is dead. It doesn't matter. My mother is dead. What she wants doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I want. And what I want is Namor dead." It's honestly creepy, just chilling, seeing her this bloodthirsty, so determined to see Namor gone. And by the third act, when she actually does confront Namor head on, and it's a one-on-one fight between them, it feels so emotionally charged, and you can just feel the anger in every attack, every strike, every slash, every claw mark. You can really feel it. It isn't until she finally sees her mother, and when her mother reaches out to her, that she's able to finally let go of that anger, as she does feel her mother with her, and suddenly she doesn't feel alone anymore. She doesn't feel like she feels like her presence is there, and that's what finally gives her the strength to let go, to move on. It's what causes her to spare Namor. Which, oh yeah, one more thing I forgot. There's another epilogue with Namor in the film, wherein Namora actually asked him why he conceded to Shuri at all, and he ultimately argued, "She could have killed me. She had every reason to, but she spared me. Now the Black Panther, the most powerful person in one of the most powerful nations in the world, has empathy for us, and as such, when the dogs come barking at Wakanda's door, which they will, they'll come to us for help." So that's devious, and that's devious. But again, when you see Shuri's journey throughout the movie, it feels so strong, and by the end, when she finally is willing to let go and move on, it's powerful, it's heartfelt, it's sweet. When she finally releases those tears of sorrow that she'd been holding back for so long, it's beautiful, and I love it. Love it, and it feels like a well-earned conclusion to the whole movie and to her character arc through the movie. So, yeah, I like it, and I love it, and I love it, and I love how the film integrates these themes throughout its story and through the characters' individual arcs. I like that it works well. It's done maturely without sacrificing action. It really does feel it really does feel like they treated this with respect. And they didn't just slap it all together because hey, it's a Marvel movie. Who cares? They actually tried to make something deep and meaningful, and I respect that. And it ultimately, I think, worked to the film's benefit to make it a strong production. Then, of course, but of course, the heroes are one thing. What about our villain? Quite frankly, I think Namor's awesome. I like while they well, yeah, I can say this. They changed his backstory for the movie. In the comics, Namor was kind of like Aquaman, half human, half fish guy. A fish guy. So they want and so they couldn't they didn't and yeah they changed that for this movie so that he was never half human. He's in fact he's actually a mutant according to his own words, which yeah I guess that would kind of tie back to Miss Marvel, but I think the signs of his mutation are different from like the X-Men. So what, I'm not gonna count them as the same thing. But bottom line, while his origin is different, the character dead ringer for the comic. One of the things that makes Namor interesting, in my opinion, is not just that he is a villain, but he's a complex villain, and he's complex in a good way. Namor, as he mentioned in the movie, holds no love for the surface world. He doesn't give two shits about us. If anything, he just sees us as the enemy because his people are under the water, and the human beings can be kind of crappy when it comes to taking care of our own planet. So, of course, he thinks that humans are just a disease that needs to be taken care of. But his reasons for why he wants to do it aren't just that he thinks that humans are barbarians, but he's genuinely worried about his people. He's afraid of what will happen if humanity comes knocking at their door. Because his people aren't just warriors. You see children there, families. They have their own economy, their own market, and he genuinely has used the vibranium to improve their lives. He's not just using it to make weapons. He's using it to actually make the place something worth to make Talokan a place worth living in. And while he is a powerful force to be dealt with, at the same time, he also is someone you can talk to. When Shuri was going through Talokan, there is a scene where he gives Shuri his mother's bracelet. There is a very heartfelt scene where Shuri talks to Namor about her grief, where she actually says, about how when her brother finally came to her, she couldn't do anything to help him, and she says, "Why was I given these abilities if I couldn't even save my own brother?" Namor's response is, "I don't have an answer for that." It's a very human response, and it's not him mocking her. It's not him mocking her grief. It's not him saying he was weak or something like that. No, he actually says, "I don't know. I don't know. I don't know." And it's basically what someone who has no attack. It's basically what someone wants. It's basically him not knowing how to offer her comfort, but also empathizing with what she's going through. And I like that. It's not just evil for the sake of evil. And his backstory does still fit into the whole I hold no love to the surface world, but I still care about my people. Because his people were driven to the sea because of Spanish conquistadors. They ran out of resources, and he was raised underwater. And the first time he finally saw land, it was people treating other people. It was people treating other people like brutally through like I said, it was he found a slave camp. He found a slave camp. He saw people whipping slaves, mistreating them, and so his response was, "I'm just gonna fucking nuke this place." It makes, of course, he does not get, of course, so it makes sense why he would hold no love for the surface world. And as a villain, he's effective. He's not just he doesn't strike against Wakanda not just because he sees them as a threat. He strikes back because he's trying to make a point. It's pretty much him saying, "Do not fuck with us," because again, he wants to keep his people safe. Like he said, when he first came up on the surface, he'd been preparing his people ever since to invade the surface world. Not because he was gonna do it right away, but because he felt there was gonna be a day when the surface world intruded onto his domain and could potentially come across And so he believed that the best way to end this threat before it became a problem was to essentially just be prepared. Hence why his army is so on the ready when it comes to going into battle. He genuinely, but and again, it's not because he wants to conquer the world or because he thinks I am me, I deserve all the power. It's because he wants to keep his people safe, and he genuinely does not give two shits about people in the service world. At the same time, though, he does respect his adversaries and his enemies. When he makes his victory speech after Queen Ramonda dies, he said he issues a threat saying, "Yes, I will come back in 1 week with my army." But he also tells them, "Bury your dead, mourn your losses." And it's not him mocking them. It's like he's pretty much saying, it's like he's saying more. It's like have your moments of peace. You deserve have your moments of peace. For I am coming back, and I will show no mercy. Mercy. Again, it really does showcase, and again, he's brilliant when he actually does concede to Shuri. He even sees the dual sided benefit of that. Yeah, he's essentially conceding power to other foes, but at the same time, this also gives them their benefit because, like you said, the Black Panther now has sympathy for them. So what happens when Wakanda suddenly starts dealing with problems from other adversaries? Or starts dealing with problems from other nations. They might come to them for help. So it's smart, and he's acted brilliantly. He's acted brilliantly. The actor they chose to play Namor gets all the inflections done perfectly. He sounds nice when he wants to be, but also threatening when he needs to be. It legitimately is a good role and is done perfectly. So yeah, you know what? We got a good villain there too. So I like that. And again, like with Black Panther, the effects for the world of Wakanda look very interesting. It looks like a very unique and interesting world that mixes, like I said, new future technology with traditional aspects. And the same kind of goes for Talokan when you actually see it. Talokan is kind of in a different vein than Wakanda, but the way it looks is just serene, especially when you see the society underwater, the glowing lights they have surrounding it, the different layers of it, the people at work. It really does feel nice, serene, and calming. Kind of nice, which is a nice way of masking the armies that he has at his disposal there. But at the same time, seeing it can kind of give you the idea of why Namor is willing to fight for these people. They are just regular people living their lives, and he doesn't want anything bad to happen to them. So I like that. It does well in showcasing it, and the story I think is done really well. Well, like as with the previous Black Panther movie and other MCU films, the action is done really well. The choreography is done spectacularly. When Shuri finally becomes the Black Panther, she kicks a lot of ass and actually takes to it really well. And like I said, I love how she integrated her little arm blasters into the suit, which I thought worked well. Her final battle with Namor is very quick paced and very emotionally charged, exploiting the abilities of both fighters perfectly. The stuff with the Midnight Angel was actually really nice. And of course, there's also Ironheart. Like with America Chavez and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, it's clear that she was just in this movie so they could set her up for future films. But at the very least, I do like how they handled her here. Yeah, she doesn't really have any major arcs in the movie. She's there to act as support. But one thing I do kind of like is how they intentionally tried to make parallels between Riri Williams and Tony Stark. They're both genius inventors who can work with whatever they got. But like Tony, Riri created an arc reactor all on her own that could fit on a chess piece. And like with the Mark I Iron Man armor, the Mark I Iron Heart armor is just kind of it's just kind of a piece of scrap suit made from spare parts. But at the same time, I do kind of like that. And there are scenes in the movie that mirror what happened with Tony. When Riri is flying away from the feds, they notice that they say there's a tracking drone that's high up, so Riri flies up. But the higher she flies, the less oxygen she gets. So while she does take out the drone, she passes out and nearly falls to the earth. Kind of like what happened to Tony when he was testing out his Mark II suit. And of course, when Riri is preparing for battle, and she makes the Mark II Ironheart armor, the way she does it and the way she's setting it up, it really does evoke imagery of Tony Stark when he was trapped in the cave and was making the Mark I armor. I think it works really well in acting as a parallel for Tony Stark. Again, I don't like the design that they ultimately came to with Ironheart. Again, it really does look more like a Power Ranger suit with armor thrown on top of it. But at the very least, I do like that they set Ironheart up for that. I do like that. I think it's well. They didn't do a lot with her in the movie, But what they did with her, I think, was suitable and does well in ultimately setting her up for future projects. And speaking of setting up for future projects, the film also does well in setting up more plot threads to be established with later films. Again, they talk about how the nations of the world want vibranium, and with basically everything Talokan did, and since Wakanda is keeping Talokan a secret, yeah, the distrust with Wakanda is growing ever larger. As the director, the director, I forgot her name, the one who is Ross's ex-wife, she ultimately claims that, yeah, she does want America to get its own stash of vibranium, and she would be she would happily is willing to try and get it to exploit it so that they can use it. She is very transparent. Yeah, she's very transparently evil, which, again, I think this character has appeared in other stuff. I think she was in the after credits stinger in Black Widow, but don't quote me on that. She probably was. I probably should go back and check that, but whatever. Point is, she's transparently evil, but she's not the big bad of the movie, so I'm not gonna really knock her for that. But it's clear. But even by the end of the movie, with Ross urging the U.S. government to not wage war with Wakanda, tensions are still high. And the thing is, even with Ross rescued, it becomes clear that at some point in the future, we don't know when, Wakanda might be going to war with other nations. So that plot thread was not resolved, and it looks like it's getting ready to be expanded on in later movies. Add on the whole thing with T'Challa's son being introduced. Yeah, it's clear that they're planning on going in more directions with this film. And that's another thing I like. I like how they introduced T'Challa's son. I think this is a great way of essentially recasting the character, as it pays respect to not only the original actor but the original character, but doesn't just brush aside the actual actor and character's death. They instead acknowledge it, build upon it, and continue on from it. In this case, and honestly, when I first saw Prince T'Challa walk in on the scene and him stating his name, it really did get to me. It really got me, like, right here, and I thought, son of a bitch, that really got me. Like, just seeing that some part of T'Challa lives on, it's nice, it's sweet, and it really does feel like this. And the fact that that's how they bring in a new T'Challa, I think, is a nice way of respecting the original actor without just outright replacing them. I love that, and it's just nice. If I had to list any flaws of the movie, I suppose one flaw I could think of would probably be Agent Ross. While he did play his part in the movie, especially with Shuri and Okoye finding Riri Williams. Beyond that, he really is a superfluous character in the movie, feeling like he's just there for the sake of having him because he was in the last movie. So honestly, his entire subplot really just feels unneeded. Really just there to set up stuff for future movies. Otherwise, it really just feels there. It's just there. Really doesn't add much to the movie beyond a few scenes here and there. But so it really does not feel that grand. And to showcase how minimal it was in the film, I genuinely forgot to talk about it in the plot summary until I had to bring up the epilogue. So that's how minimal it was. And I'm trying to think of any other flaws I had with the movie. Again, I guess you could say maybe the stuff with Riri, especially since she really does feel more like a plot device in this movie than an actual character. Still playing her part, obviously, but at the same time, like with America Chavez, I feel like that if you want to introduce her, they could have done more. But otherwise, her appearance here is clearly just to establish her for future films. Maybe a Young Avengers movie. I mean, they got America Chavez and Multiverse of Madness, so they wouldn't be. And then, of course, there was Love and Thunder. They might just be making new Young Avengers, but don't quote me on that. Whatever. I guess that could be a flaw. And I'm trying to think of other problems I have with the movie, because I feel like I did have some. There are some more minor things in there that kind of that annoyed me maybe a little bit here and there. I don't know. I think really the biggest flaw for me would probably be the stuff with Ross, and again maybe Ironheart being in there. Otherwise though, if I'll probably think of flaws when I'm done with the vlog. So I'm sorry if you wanted a more nuanced vlog. But point is, I think Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is a really damn good movie. It not only works as a superhero movie, but as a last respect to a friend and one of the main actors from other movies, it really does feel like that they went out of their way to not only make it respectful to the characters but to the actor. This movie really does feel like it was done with heart and love. That there wasn't any that it wasn't just made because, oh, we got to get a Marvel movie out. It really did feel like that they put their heart and soul into making a project that would genuinely honor someone that was cared about by others. And the way they go about it is done so maturely and well, with showcasing the grief the characters are going through while honoring everything that the character and the actor has done. The way they set it up, the way they express it, and with the film dealing with with various complex emotions, with like grief, loss, vengeance, acceptance. It really does feel like that this is a film that was done to not just cash in on new superhero movie, but because they genuinely wanted to pay respects to someone. Pay respects. Add on the great acting as always, the amazing effects, the fun action, and yes, there's humor in there to be. There's some humor to be found in this movie, though thankfully it's not as abundant and it's not all over the place. Yes, I am still angry that Love and Thunder was essentially just one big giant joke. On the whole, I think Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is a damn good movie. Is a damn good movie. Great action, great effects, well-written characters, mature themes that I think are handled perfectly, and the only flaws I can really think of are just kind of minor stuff here and there with the plot and so forth. I guess I could maybe knock some points down for not resolving the stuff with the other nations, with the other nations wanting to get their hands on vibranium. But again, I think they're maybe setting that up for future films. Otherwise, I think Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is a great movie, really damn good, and I can see why people say it's probably one of the best in the Phase 4 of the MCU. As for my own opinion on it and how it ranks in my pantheon of Marvel movies, I think this could be another contender for my new favorite movie. That doesn't mean that I think Spider-Man No Way Home is a bad movie, no. If anything, it just moves it a little bit further down the list, the same way that it displaced Thor Ragnarok. But otherwise, otherwise, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is just a damn good movie. If you have not seen it yet, I highly recommend it. I don't think you'll be wasting your time, and I think you're going to be in for a damn fun and emotional ride that'll make you feel pumped up for the action and get you right here when they remember those that have been lost. So, yeah, I think that's about it. So I'm again sorry for the various pauses and the stuff with my dogs and me coughing, but I hope that you genuinely enjoyed this video. And next week we're going to be going back to Steven Universe. The next time we venture back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's time we check back in with Scott Lang and co. as they enter a new realm of possibilities, figuratively and literally, and I finally get an excuse to check out that Loki show on Disney Plus as we take a look at Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.